Cunnion, Executive Director of Hope for HIE, and we have Dr. Kenji Cunnion here today, who is with ReAlta and ReAlta Life Sciences, which is a recent partner of Hope with Hope for HIE. You are the Chief Medical Officer of ReAlta, right?
Correct,
and
yes.
So I'm really excited to be talking about our work together today, about your journey developing this, this therapeutic, because we know with HIE, which for those of you that might be tuning in and not know, it's hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy, a type of neonatal brain injury. And it is a very difficult diagnosis for families to get, and a wide range of outcomes, including being a leading cause of neonatal mortality worldwide. I think it's the 5th leading cause. So it's a huge impact of mortality, disability, and just a wide range of outcomes. And currently there is really one gold standard of care that has been, it's actually the 20th year of the TOBI trials from the UK. So 2022 marks that. So this technology to even address HIE, I feel like is still fairly new, but the acceleration of research now of developing things like this is really in an uptick. And we're, really excited from Hope for HIE's side, obviously, to see the investment, the really just people wanting to do this work. It's not easy. It's a long process. It's complicated. And it's been very difficult, I know, to develop effective therapeutics for HIE. So I'd love to start with, kind of how you got into this research, your story behind that, and then getting with ReAlta's involvement in all of that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Betsy. Really excited to be here with you all today, and thank you for the opportunity. So I'm an infectious diseases pediatrician. I spent 30 years doing clinical care, and I also led a basic science laboratory for 20 years, focusing on inflammation, the complement system, and neutrophils predominantly. And during my 30-year career, what I found to be my most frustrating moments was when I could make a diagnosis. I knew what the mechanisms were that were driving the disease process, and I knew that I didn't have the right tool to affect a cure. I knew I couldn't adequately modify the processes driving the disease in a way that was going to be effective and lead to a good outcome. And a lot of that frustration sort of bubbled over into my research life. And when Dr. Krishna and I made an unexpected discovery 17 years ago, we worked at it for several years, and it got to a point where we had to make a decision whether we were going to stay academic and write grants and do good research, or whether we were actually going to try and develop these really interesting new molecules that could do things that no current medications can, and quit our day jobs and try and bring these forward as therapeutic agents.
Mm-hmm. Wow, what a journey.
Yeah, it's been a long journey. So I mentioned Dr. Neil Krishna. He has been my longtime collaborator, I think 17 years now. He was studying human astrovirus. So this is a virus that causes a secretory diarrhea. It doesn't cause inflammation, so it's a bit unusual for a virus to be able to infect the cells of the intestines, but not create any inflammatory response. And so he asked me what I thought about that, because I'm an infectious diseases doctor. I said, well, either the virus is really super stealthy or it's doing something to inhibit those inflammatory responses. He said, okay. And he went back and he's a structure function molecular guy. And he started looking at the structure and sequences of the proteins made by the astrovirus. And he noticed that within this one very large molecule, which makes up the outer surface, that there was a small area within that that looked similar to some known complement regulatory proteins. And we had another conversation. Our laboratories were actually across the hall from each other. And he said, well, what do you think of this? And I said, well, that's pretty interesting. That looks like something that the virus could use to inhibit complement inflammatory responses. And I run a complement lab. So if you have some extra material left over, we'd be happy to run it in our assays, our functional assays that we do every week. It's just part of our standard activities. He said, okay, well, let me make an extra batch and we'll see what happens. And it worked like gangbusters, and we thought that was pretty amazing. We spent the next 10 years or so trying to figure out a way to make it smaller. That was mostly Dr. Krishna's work. He got it from 800 amino acids, a really large protein, down to 15 amino acids. So now it's a small molecule that's potentially usable as a medication. And in my lab, we worked out exactly how it works from a mechanistic standpoint to inhibit certain aspects of the complement cascade that are known to be important in the reperfusion injury of HIE, contributing to the brain damage. And as we were working on other processes, my laboratory was also doing work in cystic fibrosis, which led to another discovery about the mechanism of action, that that these peptides can actually inhibit some of the inflammatory responses due to neutrophils. So neutrophils are a type of white blood cell. They're the most vigorous, sort of armed to the teeth white blood cell. They're sort of the ultimate warrior. They live fast and they die hard. But these cells also contribute to HIE, and there's another type of cell called microglia, which are known as the neutrophils of the brain, that have similar activities. Again, our peptide was able to show the ability to inhibit that. A neonatologist joined our group. He was a clinical neonatologist, but he wanted to explore HIE in the animal model, the Vannucci Rice animal model. He actually went up to Dr. Vannucci's lab for a couple of weeks and then brought the model back to us. He got it up and running. He said, hey, your compound is something that could potentially alter the disease process here. And we said, yeah, sure, let's give it a go. And it worked great. Decreased the zone of infarction, improved or increased the number of surviving neutrophils. It decreased the number of microglia, those inflammatory white cells going into the area of infarction, decreased the complement activation happening in the brain, improved long-term neurocognitive outcomes in the rats. So we let some of these rats grow up to be adults, and they were much smarter than the ones that didn't get the compound. And so all of that was really very encouraging. And we I came from a pediatric environment. And so the three founding institutions for ReAlta, which is the company that Dr. Krishna and I founded, were our local children's hospital, the local subspecialty pediatric group, which I was a member of. So that included not only pediatric ID docs, but pediatric neurologists, pediatric neurodevelopmental specialists, and a whole bunch of neonatologists. So we got lots of free advice over the years, which was nice. That certainly helped the process along. But pediatrics is in our DNA, and certainly HIE was really the founding light that ReAlta was established around, is to bring something, a completely new tool, and try to really bend the curve on this disease process in a way that hasn't been done previously.
It's really not. I mean, obviously, the word novel is used a lot in this this whole landscape of development, but truly, I mean, just on the non-clinical side and non-research side, as a parent who has dug deep into HIE over the past 10 years now, hearing about innovation bringing in from an infectious disease standpoint is just something that is not really heard of. That is very unique. And that collaboration is just such an interesting just evolution of how this all came about. That's just so amazing to hear how this has gone forward. And so now I know that there's been different announcements from ReAlta about moving this through through different parts of clinical trial, getting the orphan drug status and, all of that, which, it's really interesting, from a layperson's perspective, especially to see how this translates from, idea to lab to, going through this to getting actually from, I know it's a huge, huge undertaking to go from animal model to human trials, and kind of what is the, has been some of the process on that. I know, again, there's been a lot of announcements along the way from ReAlta sharing, but certainly, your perspective is definitely, would love to hear about that.
Yeah, fantastic. So whenever you develop a new compound, so this is a peptide. It's made up of standard amino acids that all of our proteins are made up of. So there's nothing exotic about it, really. What it does is incredibly interesting, but in terms of like the actual components that make it up, it's very standard stuff, and it'll just get broken down by the body's natural enzymes to individual amino acids, just like any piece of food that you would eat. So one of the things that was really important for us was to create a safe medicine. And that was actually one of our early discussions with the FDA was, we want to eventually try to target this new medication towards HIE. What do you think about that? And what would be our steps to get there? And the FDA has been phenomenally collaborative with us throughout this process, because they understand how great the unmet medical need is. And so they are very enthusiastic to work with ReAlta and other companies working in rare disease spaces where there aren't good therapies available. And one of the first things they told us was, you need to have something really, really safe, because this is the most vulnerable population, and you can't harm them. So we did animal toxicology studies. Basically, we gave the maximum dose we could give without basically flooding the bloodstream with so much fluid that the animals couldn't tolerate the fluid load, and showed that it was safe in those toxicology studies. We did a healthy volunteer adult study in humans last year. We dosed through all of the doses that we felt were going to be useful and needed for future stages of development, clinical development, as well as the doses we felt we would need for treatment. And it was phenomenally safe. So no serious adverse events, no laboratory changes, no heart electricity changes. Everybody tolerated it beautifully. So we felt it was a really, really safe molecule to move forward. So then we went back to the FDA and said, hey, look, we've got a lot of safety data, a huge amount of safety data, and it looks great. And we've got the preclinical animal model data in the HIE rat pup that looks really, really promising. And the FDA said, you're right. This is really good stuff. We're really excited about this. And just a few weeks ago, they approved our investigational new drug application to start a phase 2 clinical trial in babies with HIE. So this gives us a tremendous amount of excitement, a tremendous amount of confidence that we're on the right path. And again, the FDA has been very collaborative. They've given us a lot of pointers, a lot of hints, a lot of suggestions, like, hey, you should think about this, and as you move forward, these are the things we're going to be looking for to eventually, hopefully, approve this medicine for HIE. So they've been a great partner.
That's great. And, when we talk about partnership, one of the things I know that obviously, I've been working and connecting with you for, I don't know, I think it's now over a year. And I know originally, actually, I was looking back and I think it was 2018. It might have been sooner or earlier than that. But a former board of directors member of ours, Nick Burton, actually met you all at a HIE symposium. So it's been very interesting to see obviously the concurrent growth of ReAlta, the concurrent growth of Hope for HIE, and then looking at how we can come together and kind of look at what is important to the patient and families during this process as well, which we obviously are very grateful for. It's something that, it has been a shift in therapeutic development. Certainly, I think the rare disease, community has really been amazing with advocacy and really involvement in study design, looking at core outcome measures and things like that. And from our perspective, we have seen so many times of especially with cooling, there's so many holes and gaps of who qualifies, how it can be implemented, things like that. And parents do have a lot of thoughts behind that of what and also decreasing barriers of, it can be very scary for parents to opt into clinical trials. So how can we, message and make sure that people understand how important this is, how safe it is to enroll their children in for any clinical trial, because just like those initial cooling families 20 years ago had to take that leap of faith for their children. And cooling sounds crazy. It's like a crazy concept. You're taking your newborn baby who is normally needs a lot of life supportive measures, and you're cooling them down to about 91 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 days. That is just, it's a very science fiction-like thought process when you're on this outside and you're, in this intensive care situation. So I'm really, really grateful that ReAlta this has been such a part of the process, and that we're able to, moving forward, be able to, talk through some of those things that will help families understand most what, the benefit could be to their families, and just participating in, clinical trials can do for the state of the diagnosis as well.
Fantastic. So I just take a moment and address the barrier issue that you raised. So one of the big barriers for hypothermia, therapeutic hypothermia, is it's only available in about 400 centers in the United States. So it requires very specialized capabilities. And if you're born, if you're unfortunate enough to be born too far away geographically from one of these cooling centers, and you can't, and the baby can't get there in 6 hours, well, after that 6-hour window is closed, there's the hypothermia hasn't been shown to be beneficial. So there are a lot of, the barrier, the geographic and time barrier around hypothermia is a huge one for so many folks, and certainly in parts of the world where cooling centers are even harder to come by, where they are very few and far between, or don't exist at all. So this is part of what we think is so important, is that a medication that works for HIE could be in every delivery room anywhere. And then you remove that geographic, that time limitation barrier, if you can have a medication that is effective and can be in a delivery room in any hospital anywhere. The second aspect you brought up was about the involvement of families and getting their input. And this is why we're so enthusiastic about collaborating with Hope for HIE, why we're so excited about it, and why we think it's so important is because the families and the children, in the end of the day, are what count. And to be able to work with Hope for HIE to get the inputs of the families, to get the guidance of the families to get their perspective, what's important to them, and then be able to integrate that into family-centered outcomes, so that we're focusing on what's most important to the families, and then we can and we can look at those, and we can measure those, and we can quantify those, and we can show how much how important this is, beyond just neurons and laboratory values. I mean, in the end, it's the lives of the children and how it impacts the families that counts at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And again, just we talk about this a lot, especially with our board. And I know, I believe you've met David at some point on a call, who's our board president. And I always go back to his reaction when he hears from people that are doing this work, like you are doing and ReAlta is doing, and how especially the HIE experience from the parent side is very isolating. You feel like, it's like everything is about preemies when people talk about NICU. And,
Yes.
And so when you get into this experience and you go through and you kind of feel like you're a fish out of water, and that, they're like, oh, your baby's the biggest one in the NICU. And you're like, yeah, and they've been on this cooling mat, which is very strange. And you really don't have anyone to relate to. And so you kind of carry through, that's the start of your journey with it. And, obviously for us as a patient advocacy organization and support organization, connecting families is the core of who we are to help support them through that. But it is a ubiquitous experience where families kind of feel like, especially in neonatology, traditionally, we're kind of like on the outside of the norm and don't feel included. So when we hear, companies like ReAlta and researchers taking on this work, it truly means so much to our community, to know that this is being worked on, and this is your life's work. This is many people's lives' work, and the potential impact is just so incredible to think of, that this could be, and hopefully will be, just a complete game changer in this diagnosis.
Yeah, that's absolutely our goal, is for this to be a game changer, and understanding where, just to put a little bit more color into understanding where ReAlta comes from. We have our mission and vision is to really put new game-changing medicines into the hands of physicians, so they can help folks that currently physicians can't provide much help for. I mean, hypothermia is provides some help, but there's still a big gap, and there's still a lot of need there. Part of our number one core value is do what's right for the patient, and we take that to heart, and we work very, very hard to try and do the best we can and move this process along thoughtfully, carefully, but also quickly, hopefully, because we do think it can make a big impact. So we're always mindful of safety. That is always paramount to us, but also the longer if it is a transformational therapy, which we certainly hope it will be, the longer you wait, you're missing, babies are missing the opportunity to benefit. So we're always trying to balance these parts of the human equation.
Definitely. That's the challenge, but also the excitement of working together and everyone on that common goal of how can we do this to show the biggest, hopefully, get it to that finish line of showing that impact, and then getting it into the hands of people to improve the quality of life and save these babies. I mean, that's, it is such a hard diagnosis and such a hard experience. And I mean, to think of how that can be taken down, even, any percentage would be significant. I mean, that's talking 1% of global cases would be tens of thousands of kids would benefit. I mean, that's, you think about what that could do for so many people. I mean, and that's, I'm throwing out a random percentage. I'm sure it's greater than that with that potential. But that to me, when people think about the numbers behind that of how many families that currently impacts, when we talk about, the US, I've seen anywhere from 1 to 3 per thousand live births. I mean, that's tens of thousands of families every year, and you stratify that across a decade. I mean, it is significant, and that's just in one country, and we talk about, something that's would be available to, worldwide scope, and to under-resourced countries and things like that. It's just, it's really just, we talk about anything in rare disease like that, it is huge. So, all that to say, I'm just really grateful for the work that, that you have done, are doing. And so when we talk about taking this to trials, what is the scope of, the patients that are going to be qualifying for that, that you hope to enroll?
Yeah, we're basically going to follow the sort of in general strokes what would qualify any HIE baby for cooling. So it's not going to be real complicated, and we want to make it simple and accessible for the neonatologists, for the NICU nurses, for the families, so that people can feel comfortable getting on board and participating, and not feel that there's anything to be uncomfortable or feel as concerning. And so we think it's a pretty straightforward. We're going to be looking at a variety of different outcome measures. I mean, the sort of the standard neurodevelopmental kind of things, but also seizures and MRI findings, as well as some blood markers and those types of things. And this first phase 2 study will focus very heavily on safety. It'll focus on figuring out what's the best dose to move forward with into subsequent studies, and show hopefully at least some early hints of what it can do in terms of modifying the disease process and leading to better outcomes for these babies and brighter futures for the families.
Absolutely. And so with clinical trials, what are the first, time, when would people kind of be be doing these check-ins as far as you're tracking development and things like that with the aims of, of outcome measurement?
Yeah, so we're going to, our treatment, we're only targeting to be given during the period of cooling, so the first 3 days of life. So it's not an extended therapy. So it's simple, targeted, and relatively brief. Unlike a monoclonal antibody, because it is a peptide that gets degraded by normal enzymes in the bloodstream, it'll be out of the baby's system within a day or two at the longest, whereas antibodies can last for weeks and months. So we think that will also provide a safety benefit, because you don't have this long tail end where the therapy is still around, even though you don't think it's really needed anymore. But we're going to be getting these EEGs, so the electrical activity in the brain, looking for seizures, and these MRI imaging readouts over the first 2 weeks of life. That'll provide a lot of early data about potential benefits from the medication. And so even though we will do a 2-year follow out for these babies mostly for safety, but also for long-term neurodevelopmental assessment. It's really going to be that MRI and EEG information in the first 2 weeks, that once we complete enrollment and we put that data together, we're going to take that package back to the FDA without waiting for that additional 2 years to pass by, to go back and start having that next round of conversation about here's what we saw, here's what we think the benefits are. And the FDA has told us that they're going to work with us in a collaborative fashion to really design the next study together, so that it will be what's called a pivotal trial. It'll be the trial that decides whether the FDA will approve our medicine for HIE.
Wow, just amazing. So exciting, and so many things to come with this. So we are at the 5 o'clock mark, and I want to be respectful of time and everything, and want to thank you so much for sharing all of this information today, for the collaboration, working together, and just really eager to move forward and help in any way we can to show the need always for the therapeutic gap that exists, and just really hopeful. So I mean, this truly, our organizational name is Hope for HIE. I mean, this is a perfect example of another way that this is, this development could very well be a game-changing hope for HIE. So, and we're so grateful for ReAlta, for you coming on today, and for working together.
Thanks so much, Betsy. ReAlta tremendously values the collaboration with Hope for HIE. We think it's the right thing to do, and it's going to really yield tangible benefits for the children and for the families.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for everyone who has been tuning in today. We can continue this conversation in comments and messages afterwards. So you're welcome to pop back in at any time and review this again. It'll be posted to our pages. And again, thank you for joining us today. And we look forward to more of these in the future as things develop. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.